Yeah, folks, we're exploring Washington State from Mexico today. Okay.
Welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. Here's your host, Scott Cowan.
All right. We are back again with the Exploring Washington State podcast. This is episode 2 with Ed Beeson. For those of you that haven't listened to episode 1, stop immediately, go back, listen to that, and then you'll know where we're at for episode 2. Although they're, frankly, let's be real, Ed, these are separate, independent conversations. So, Ed, I'm going to recap your career. You produced a whole lot of music shows through multiple venues in the Puget Sound. And then through kind of a interesting series of events, you ended up producing music at SeaTac Airport. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So welcome back. How's the weather?
Well, I'm have the good fortune of being in La Paz, Mexico, and the weather here is 76 degrees and not a cloud in the sky.
Yeah, folks, we're exploring Washington State from Mexico today. Okay. So Ed, why don't let's kind of go back and we'll overlap from the first episode. Why don't you walk me through how this all came about?
Yes, well, it was kind of started in 2011, and I had just coming off of a failed experiment in the town of Stanwood, Washington, where I was combining a live music concert venue, a summer concerts festival called Slow Food and Roots Music Festival, and anyway, we was kind of not knowing what I was going to do next. And I got a call from an old associate who or at the time, it was a director of the Benaroya Hall music venue. It's a separate organization from the Seattle Symphony. It's no longer that way, but at the time there was 2 separate nonprofits. One was a nonprofit that ran the Benaroya Hall, and then Seattle Symphony just basically did all their symphony business. They were all housed in basically the same building. But anyway, the reason why I got the call is the director's name was Troy Skubitz. And I had worked with Troy way back in 2001, where I'd produced a summer concert series at Benaroya Hall, where to me, the peak of that series was we had Nina Simone in concert at Benaroya Hall, one of her last time performing in the United States before she died. Anyway, so that's how I knew Troy. I'd done work for Benaroya Hall off and on. At the time, Troy was not the executive director, but he is now. So the position that they were in was, like a lot of other larger venues, they found that they needed to book their own venue, because the big guys like AEG and Live Nation and all the big producers had their own venues. So, and this is coinciding when the number of symphony dates were falling off as their attendance was falling off. So they were down to like under 200 gigs a year, something like that. So that left a lot of open dates. And so they brought me in to fill up the room with other types of music besides symphony music. So, of course, I jumped at the opportunity and took the position. I can't remember exactly what my title was, something like programming director for Benaroya Hall. And kind of as a side note, Benaroya Hall is, the building is actually owned by the city of Seattle. So that put me in a position to have contact with people at the city in my programming and marketing of the events that we were doing there. So about, I can't remember exactly, about 6 months into that job, I came up with an idea for marketing the shows that we were booking by putting professional musicians, some from the symphony perhaps, but just Seattle's top musicians, out in the lobby on 3rd Avenue of Benaroya Hall, where the bus, creates a big crowd out there, and there's a Starbucks out there and a little cafe. So what I wanted to do was to put musicians out there, like musicians would perform at the Pike Place Market, was kind of the inspiration. But instead of just having musicians sign up and whoever signed up and paid their fee could play, we wanted this to be curated and to kind of present the best of Seattle's homegrown music. And so I got referred, of course, the first question is, so we're not selling tickets to this, so how do we pay for it? So I went to the director of the Office of Film and Music, a guy named James Keblis, and talked to him about my idea, and he thought it was a really cool idea. And so he said, well, let me see if I can find you some money. So in fact, he came back, not too much longer, and said, hey, I think I've got some money out of the transit system where they want to activate bus stops. So in 3rd Avenue in particular in Seattle is kind of a gritty area, all the way up to the McDonald's there by the former Bon Marché Macy's. It was pretty gritty because that's where all the bus stops were, and who rides the buses, but grittier people. And so we got some money, and so we started working through that. And of course, then getting the money is a real process because you have to go through applications. And the important part of the whole story up till now is that all of my work on this idea was on behalf of Benaroya Hall. I was their employee. The project was going to be for music at Benaroya Hall with the purpose of promoting this new kind of programming that we were doing for them. So while they were in the process of finding some money for us, James Keblis came back to me and said, hey, I don't know if you've heard about this, but I've been working with SeaTac Airport, and they're embracing Seattle, the City of Music, which was a new initiative by the music commissioners of Seattle to give it a name. Austin, Texas is live music capital of the world. Of course, Nashville is Music City. There's others. So Seattle is going to be the City of Music. And so as a promotional arm of that, it was City started working with Port of Seattle at SeaTac Airport to have all of the overhead music converted to local artists. And then all of the TSA announcements would be by famous local musicians. So they had everybody from Quincy Jones to Macklemore to Brandy Carlisle to Ann and Nancy Wilson they were doing all this TSA announcements. And so they had just recently kicked off the whole program, and I'd seen it in the news, so I was aware of it, but I hadn't really thought of them as live music. But James says, they've done all this, and they've been wrestling with a way to do live music. And I was familiar, having gone to Austin many times, that at Austin they had live music in their airport, and they had set up a special place for that in their airport. And then I was also aware that in Nashville and I think Memphis as well, airports had a lot of the bars and restaurants in the airport terminal would have live music, which I thought was really cool. So yes. I had those two things to kind of, wrap my head around. And Keblis was, of course, familiar with all of those places as well. So he was saying, all of those things are, going to take a long time to make happen. And I think your idea, we could put that into place like right away. So it basically taking my whole idea for Benaroya Hall and planning it at SeaTac Airport. And then it would become a marketing tool for Benaroya Hall. They would have, those, tens of thousands of people a day seeing musicians playing with a big sign up saying Benaroya Hall, see what's coming to Benaroya Hall. So it was all going to be a really cool win-win-win kind of deal. So we got into these conversations. James introduced me to the people at SeaTac Airport who were kind of leading that initiative at the airport with the overhead music and the announcements and things like that. And so we started talking about my idea, and and then the thing that slowed everything down, because the idea was pretty easy to get your head around, but the challenge was, okay, now we have to create a contract. We have to create an agreement for Benaroya Hall to come in here and do this. And of course, Ed Beeson's going to run it for Benaroya Hall. And so it's just going along, and then it got, the whole process got shoved off to attorneys for both parties. And it was the attorney for Benaroya Hall, who it's, because it's a big organization, I think it was like a pro bono position, but long story short, they just could not come together. They just could not come to an agreement. And finally, we had kind of a come to Jesus meeting where the folks at SeaTac Airport said, "This isn't going anywhere. We're done talking here. I just feel like we're wasting our time. The agreement that Benaroya Hall has crafted is just so far in the weeds that we just think we just have to walk away from this. Thanks for your time." So I just raised my hand and said, I can do this without Benaroya Hall. I don't need Benaroya Hall to do this. And because I had some bandwidth to make that happen, and I just really, by the time I started getting this idea out in the air and talking to other people about it, I just kept getting more and more jazzed about it. Like, this could really, really be cool. Especially when I thought of it being at SeaTac Airport and the exposure that, local musicians could get in that environment, it was incredible. So it took them a little while. They didn't really know of my background. So they, wisely asked around and kind of dug into who I was and what my background was. And came up with the decision of, okay, let's try it. So basically, just on a very rough agreement that the Port of Seattle had me sign, I didn't write an agreement. We launched the thing. It was originally scheduled to run for 12 weeks on a trial basis. And so in those first 12 weeks, I started bringing in local musicians. And we were initially tested different spots in the airport.
And we just lost Ed.
Oh, we just lost Ed. Bummer.
Okay, we are back. We had some technical challenges. Ed was in the process of telling us how the SeaTac Airport busking came about. So, Ed, let's pick it back up.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
That's great. Well, I mean, let's just say that this is a long story. It's really an important story because, I mean, it's the first time in my life, and I can't imagine it happens terribly often, that like a whole new business is created that never existed before. And as far as I know, still does not exist anywhere other than in Seattle, like Gigs for You exists. So that's why I love telling the story, but it's important to have all the information. And kind of where we left off was I had been talking to the people at Port of Seattle at SeaTac Airport, and they had given me to do this individually, whereas originally the plan was to do this on behalf of Benaroya Hall. So so that was just a really important moment right there, because not only did the opportunity to make this happen become a reality, but it was, in order to make it happen, I also had to agree. Well, no one twisted my arm. I just knew that I had to agree to just stick with the original idea, which was really didn't have any money in it for me, because so I started a business that I was not going to make any money at, because I was still working at Benaroya Hall and I couldn't be at two places at one time. So the whole thing, all of the money was paying for someone to be on site and to assist the artists when they came in to get going. So it's kind of an important part, because first of all, it's a business that had never been done before. And we were starting off with kind of our hands tied, because we weren't going to be making any money. And it wasn't too long before I realized that I was actually going to be losing money, in order to start this company, because the liability insurance requirements that were necessary in order for us to do this at Benaroya Hall were like, at the time, well over $5,000 a year. I can't remember exactly, but it was a lot of money to me, someone who was, starting over in life at age 67 years old, or what it was, 66. And so somehow I convinced the airport that they needed to pay me $5,000 up front for my idea, which I didn't, I was already walking on thin ice with them, because they didn't even know who I was or that I could do it. And it's like a 12-week trial basis. And they have a policy of never paying anybody for anything until the work is done and inspected. And,
right.
They're a government agency. So I don't know how they worked it out, but they worked it out. And before too long, I got a check for $5,000, but it wasn't until after we'd started the program. And initially I worked with a young musician, his name is Judd Wasserman, and we brought in Judd, and he packed a little portable amplifier and his guitar around. I probably carried one or the other. And we just went around to different places in the airport, and he just plugged in his amp places that had power, and he just started singing. And he didn't even have a microphone. He brought a microphone, that's right. Initially, we didn't provide any sound systems at all. We were just totally, winging this thing. Like, if you just want to play acoustic in the airport, fine. This was all just a giant experiment. So, probably into about week 6, we got word back from the airport that everybody loves it. I mean, this is like, everybody's just grinning from ear to ear. This is like the best thing ever. And so by that time, after about 6 weeks, I was working with about 5 or 6 different musicians. And actually, this is how I came up with the name for the company of Gigs for You, is that as soon as we got past working with Judd on the first, 3 or 4 days of just trying out different spaces, I just started texting musicians I knew over the years, and it was, just, hey, I have gigs for you. And of course, when you're doing a text, you do it the quickest way possible. So that's how it came up, with a number and a letter. And so musicians started getting back to me, and so I started bringing in other musicians, and I tried to, diversity was really important to the airport. So all different kinds of music. So initially, I can remember that we had Judd Wasserman, kind of a young Seattle singer-songwriter, a young violin player and songwriter, went by the stage name Raz. And so Raz played an electric violin. And then we had Country Dave Harmonson, Orville Johnson. So it's kind of, there's blues and country, jazz. I can't remember exactly who else. It doesn't matter. I could send you a whole list of all the artists, but it was in any case, everybody that came in, it was all an experiment for them too. So we just kind of worked our way through it. Some people brought in like a whole sound system.
Oh, wow.
And we realized that's not going to work. Some people just brought in a little portable, and it was this artist named Raz who came in with a Roland Street Cube, and we all said, this is what we need to do. This is great. Runs on batteries. We can set up anywhere. The sound quality is pretty darn good. We're not trying to fill up, the whole airport. We're only trying to provide sound to an intimate group of people who care and want to maybe sit closer or just appreciate the fact that someone's playing live music. So we had to figure out all of those things in those first few weeks. And then they changed from a 12-week contract to a 12-month contract. So we started in March, so we were good until next March. And then somewhere along the line, like towards November of that 2013, the airport the Port of Seattle put out an RFP, which was to expand the program and to be a much bigger program. So during that trial period, we had 2 musicians a day, Monday through Friday. So that's 10 gigs a week.
Wow.
And for about 50 weeks. So that's 500 gigs that year. That's a lot of gigs.
So let me ask you this: how long were these performances?
Well, that was we kind of decided that in the early part of the discussions of the because coming into the airport is not like going to any other gig. You have to go through security, and it's really a challenge. So we allowed like an hour for a musician to get to a location and get set up and start performing. And then we also kind of figured, well, we want to pay musicians an appropriate rate. So we figured $25 an hour was the appropriate rate. And so we made it like a 4-hour gig. 1 hour was loading in, 1 hour was loading out, and you had 2 hours in between to play. Well, we got over time, we got way faster than that, and things just got way more efficient. So it kind of turned out the musicians were, coming in and being set up, really quick. So anyway, over the course of that first year, it was just like light bulbs were going off over my head just all the time on how friggin' great this is. Musicians were being paid to play at a gig on Tuesday at 10 a.m. and we were paying them $100. And the coolest thing about the whole thing is that the travelers in the airport were contributing with either buying merchandise or throwing dollar bills in an open guitar case, to where the musicians were making on average of $200 from the patrons in the airport. So for, it's like a $300 gig at 10 a.m. on Tuesday. Holy cow. So musicians could also still work all of their night gigs. They could not interfere, because a lot of the musicians who are professionals also teach music. When they, and that's usually like an after school thing. So from 4 to 6, usually a lot of musicians are very busy with classes. And so it was like just a whole new revenue stream for musicians that never existed before. And as we learned, the whole reason is that a lot of big organizations would like to do this, but it was really, no one wanted to have the responsibility of wrangling all of these musicians. Because it's really a lot of work. So we just, over the course of that first year, put a lot of systems in place that made it very efficient, like online scheduling systems. And those give you the ability to schedule somebody that you don't ever see, and they get a notice via text message. This is where technology we love. And so that was one of the key things. And then the other key thing was that we didn't choose to, but we had to have this liability insurance that not only covered me and my company or my employees, but all of these independent contractors, which were the musicians. And that was hard to find. And we basically found a company that said, yeah, we'll do that. And although it wasn't cheap, as I mentioned. Right. So those were the two key things. And then just the fact that, having owned a venue before, I know that once you start paying musicians to play, every musician on the planet finds out who you are, and they start saying, hey, I want that gig too. So over a course of a pretty short period of time, we ended up with like 1,000 local musicians in our database, all wanting that gig. And during that first year, we only grew the roster to about, it was under 20 musicians. And primarily, the reason for that was that every musician that played, and me and all of my staff, we had to get clearance through the TSA security. So we had to become badged you had to get a security badge and go through a screening process and take tests actually before you could get the badge. And so that was also just something that we learned because we had the opportunity to learn it. That's something I couldn't have ever figured out having not been inside doing it. So it was just a matter over that, like I said, that first year, we just learned so much about how to make this thing work smoothly and efficiently. And it was just the best win-win-win situation I've ever been a part of, where, the musicians were absolutely loving. I mean, they're just going, oh my God, I'm making an extra $1,000 a month off of this gig, and I still get to keep all my other work, So it was really, really powerful. So then when we were awarded the first 3-year contract in 2014, and so we kept going, but along the way in 2014, and the good thing about 2014 contract was that I then could put in money into the proposal that paid for all of the overhead that I was creating. In that first year, I kind of just did it on the salary I was getting from Benaroya Hall, which actually didn't last too long because Benaroya Hall went through some major changes in 2013 to where they dissolved Benaroya Hall as a separate entity and brought everything under the banner of the Seattle Symphony. And as a result, me and Troy Skubitz, the guy who I was working with at Benaroya Hall, we were all out of a job. So a lot of things changed. And but the good news is that we had this incredibly, cool little gem of a new business. And so also about the same time, 2014, it really more and more people were aware of the program because people fly. And so they see musicians, they go, hey, that's really cool. And I started getting phone calls from different people going, hey, we'd like to have that. And once we got the full program, and we were there, the full program was 7 days a week, 4 gigs a day. So that went from 10 gigs a week to 28 gigs a week. Anyway,
well, wait a second. Wait a second. Whoa.
Yeah, slow me down.
So I got to slow you down because I got questions, and I'm going to slam the brakes on here. First off, back in the day, I had one of those badges that allowed me to drive a vehicle on the runway at SeaTac Airport.
Oh yeah.
So I know I know what the process was. I don't know if, you're telling me. So here's questions I have about stereotyping musicians. You're telling me you could get musicians to be present at 10 a.m. on a weekday? Come on now. They all sleep. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But
I had to also find musicians who hadn't been arrested for marijuana or something too. So
okay. So so you had the whole background check. So I don't know that we're going to talk in the historical sense right now. I don't want to know about today because maybe things have changed. Let's not go there yet. But so you're telling me the musicians during that first year had to go through the Port of Seattle's background check to get a badge that would allow them to pass through security and into areas of the airport that the general public is not allowed to go. And that can be anywhere from a hallway to, there's so many things going on at SeaTac Airport.
Yeah.
That process right there alone is cumbersome.
Exactly.
And you found musicians that wanted to do this for I kid, a 10 a.m. on Tuesday gig. But then you went ahead and the next year you ramped it up to 4 shows a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Okay. How much staff did that take from your side of the equation?
Well, it was, it's great. And it's an important part of the story because in the first year, once we started getting some momentum, I couldn't keep up with it anymore. For a while, I was doing it around what my responsibilities for Benaroya Hall were. But, it also involved walking about 10 miles a day. And
well, that's a good health benefit.
Yeah, it is.
You didn't have to keep your membership at the gym.
Right, exactly. But I needed to maintain my job at Ben Royal Hall to keep this thing afloat. So a good friend of mine had just closed up a restaurant that they had owned, and was looking for work. And I said, well, do you want to come down and help me with this live music program? And so that was Ramona Gradi did this. And
Okay.
she was someone I met while I was doing business in Stanwood. And so Ramona came all the way down from Camino Island 4 days a week to do this. And, I was able to pay her, the $25 an hour was kind of like our base rate. And for the gig manager in that first year, that was only like, $125 a day. So it wasn't much. So fortunately, Ramona was in a situation where she could make that work for herself. But she kind of fell in love with the whole process too. And really became a super important person in building the company. I had all the experience, but she had this brand new passion for it, and was just so passionate about the musicians and making this thing work for them, that she, that became kind of her thing. And she did a tremendous job in building that roster, managing the database, all the musicians who, wanted to get gigs. She handled all of that. And she also had to learn about the whole badging process. And, she just soaked it all up like a sponge, and, made all of this happen and allowed me to keep some income and work on other projects that also kept the whole thing afloat in the first year. But that whole first year was done at a loss. We lost money that first year. And so when we got into that 2014, that was the first time we actually started making money on this thing.
Mm-hmm.
More questions?
No.
Okay.
Well, I have them, but let's move on into we'll call it phase 2 of the project. Yeah.
Well, this it's kind of, the important thing is just to talk about how the business grew, because so in that first year we did like under $100,000 in gross income. Mm-hmm. And we spent like $110,000 to make it happen.
Okay.
And so the next year, the money went up substantially to about $300,000 a year. So that was a pretty big jump. So I was able to pay myself, but we still kept your question before was how many people did it take on our side to make this happen? Right. So going into that second year, then we started hiring. We gave them the job title as gig manager. And so the gig managers were the people who would assist with setting up the musician at the locations. Because over that first year, we came up with all these little solutions to our problems. So we identified the best places in the airport to play, and we identified, just a lot of the processes that need to take place. Like it didn't work out to have musicians bringing in their own PA. It was really slow and awkward getting through TSA. It had a lot of problems. So we just kind of adopted the Roland Street Cube as being the standard. And, that was one of the things that I spent my own money on to make happen, because not every musician had the resources to go buy themselves that little sound system. So that cost us about $500 per unit with, when you include a microphone, mic stand, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. The airport supplied, like a carpet on which to roll out and carts, and they did signage too, because they wanted to take credit for this program. So the signage was basically saying, "Experience a City of Music," brought to you by SeaTac Airport. And then the musicians could have a little table that they could put their merch out on. And, like I say, over that first year, we refined all of those things. For example, the airport, when they first provided us with carpets, they were like 10 by 12 or 10 by 16. They were like huge. And it was all we could do to lift them and put them and roll them out. And of course, they just get filthy, dirty, and just packing all this dirt around. And so we initially just cut them in half, and that became a lot more manageable. So there's a whole lot of that. Like in starting any new business, you just do whatever you have to do to make it work. But it was when we got that new contract. Yeah, go ahead.
I still have a question. So I'm kind of saying this tongue in cheek, but at $25 an hour to the musicians, that doesn't cover airport parking.
That was part of the deal. They gave us free parking, which was
that was my question. Is walk me through, because the airport, depending on the time of day, it's quite busy. Were they pulling up to curbside, dropping off the themselves and their instruments, and then being ushered inside, or did they have to park over one of the towers and then you met them there? How did you
in the first
start
year,
the process?
Yeah, in the first year, they got parking. We told them, the best place to park, where it was usually available, and then we would meet in the lobby of the airport's administrative conference center place.
Oh, okay.
So we would meet there, and then we would all go out together in one group. And the person at the airport who was responsible for making things happen, which also she deserves a tremendous amount of credit for the success of the whole project. Her name is Tammy Kuiken, spelled Kuiken. Tammy was, a lifelong Seattle music fan, and she really put her heart into this, making this whole program work. She went above and beyond over and over again to make things work for us. And she was our voice, to the rest of the Port of Seattle and SeaTac administration to get us things that we needed. But yeah, that was, those working in an airport was really the biggest challenge. And the good news is that because of that, we created a company that now became very attractive to other big organizations like Amazon and, property like Pacific Place. Who else became our client? An organization called Friends of Waterfront Seattle hired us. Seattle Parks and Recreation hired us because they were doing their own busker program, but it wasn't anywhere near as good as ours. And the real big one was we got hired by Downtown Seattle Association to activate Westlake Park and Occidental Park. Both parks at the time, this was back in 2014, were pretty much just homeless encampments, places where no one wanted to be. They were pretty awful. And so this whole activation thing was something that was created back in New York City. And so Seattle was adopting a similar program. And so we were with them at the very, very beginning of this, because having live music was part of the magic of activation program. And the theory being is that if you shine a spotlight on these dark places, that people will come. And it was just remarkable to see the parks transform from a place where literally our artists were threatened and stolen from and terrified at times, to these wonderful places in the city of Seattle that we were all of us, myself, all the musicians, everybody on DSA, we were just all so proud of ourselves for the work that we did, because it wasn't easy, to make that happen. I mean, some of the gigs we took were, close to life-threatening, just putting musicians out on the streets of Seattle, and sometimes that's not a very safe place, sorry to say. But the good news is that, we just kept getting more and more gigs. By the time we got into 2015, we were doing over 2,000 gigs a year.
What? 2,000? 2,000
gigs a year. 1,500 of those were at SeaTac Airport, so that's a big chunk. But
that's mind-boggling.
We had one day. It was when Amazon was also, the timing was pretty good because Amazon was just opening up buildings left and right in downtown Seattle in the Westlake area. And so every time they opened up a new building, they hired us to come in, and we'd have musicians on every floor at various places throughout the building as kind of a welcoming to all the new employees that were coming in. So we developed a great relationship with Amazon. The cool thing is that not hardly a single one of those clients would have hired us had it not been for them seeing and being aware of our program at SeaTac Airport.
Right.
It just it became a new way to interact, and we had done all the work to where we had created this infrastructure of database, scheduling systems, liability insurance, trained and professional staff, to where we could pull off anything. We had one day with one of the openings of a building, an Amazon building, where we had 30 gigs in one day.
Okay. 30 gigs in one day.
Yeah.
How long were these gigs?
Oh, they're pretty much, we developed that our standard was a 2-hour gig. And,
okay. So you did do.
Yeah, we kind of made that the standard. Some of the gigs, like at the parks, they only paid the artists $50. But over time, that's something else we're proud of, is that every year we've increased the average amount of money musicians make with Gigs for You gigs. Okay. And so we've kept pace with that. The only time when things fell apart was, of course, during the pandemic.
Well, since you brought up that, you said that word, let's talk about that. What happened? I have a guess what happened, but what actually happened to the performances during the pandemic? Did you completely stop them, or?
Yes, it was pretty heartbreaking. We had, even in our first 3-year contract, we kept learning things and got more efficient, and we weren't really making money until the second 3-year contract. So we were just about to begin our third contract in March. It started March 1 of 2020 was our new contract with the Port of Seattle. And it was it was like the first contract that I knew it had taken us a long time to figure out our business model, because there was no one to look to. There wasn't another company like ours. I mean, I challenge anybody to give me an example of someone who's doing exactly what we're doing. So we just had to figure it out. And the part of the challenge is that in regards to the airport, we only had every 3 years to figure it out, because then we had to live with that deal for the next 3 years. And almost consistently, every time we got to the end of 3 years, we weren't making very much money from the deal we had struck, just the nature of things. So, March 15th of 2020, 2 weeks into our new contract with the Port of Seattle, which they had expanded up to be a $400,000 a year contract, it all came to an end. And the program was put on hold, and we haven't done any work in the airport since. So it's coming up to a complete 2 years with no live music at the airport. That part of that program. I was so proud that we had reached a point to where the amount of business we were doing besides SeaTac Airport was more than 50% of the airport business. But I challenge anybody to try to withstand losing 50% of your business. But we did better than that. We lost almost 90% of our business because everything shut down. It wasn't just SeaTac Airport. Everything shut down. If it hadn't been for payroll protection that kept Ramona and I going, and our other key management people, we kind of kept the core business going. Big thanks to many of our clients. For example, even SeaTac Airport continued to pay us for that first quarter. They paid us for everything we had scheduled. And then, and also during part of that time, we started doing virtual shows. So we tried to figure out a way that they could keep paying us to keep our company alive. And as you might remember, everybody thought, well, this thing's going to be over in 3 or 4 months anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So So it went from bad to worse in June when, all of our everything, because we were doing all of our other work was really focused on the summer, and all of that went away.
Mm-hmm.
And we just did whatever we could to keep the business alive, because we had this contract with SeaTac Airport that we had to somehow keep it alive. That my life, my personal life, my future depended upon it. When that happened, I was, at that time 71 years old. I can't withstand, losing everything at 71 years old. I certainly wouldn't choose to. So we did everything we could to keep the business alive, and with federal programs that we took advantage of everyone. A few grants. I think we picked up probably 3 different grants. It wasn't big money. 20,000 here, 15 there, and then SBA loans. We're still in business today, and we're actually on the verge of restarting the SeaTac program in March of this year. So it is coming back. It's not going to come back full speed because, of course, as we all well know, the pandemic is not over.
No, it's around.
Yeah, we hung in there.
So I'm really glad to hear that it's coming back, and I'm sure it'll look different than it did pre-COVID. Couple of questions. This is just the way my brain works. I was wrapped around the axle on, well, how are these musicians parking at the airport? That's where my brain goes. So I have a couple of questions though. In your opinion, where's the best place for a gig at SeaTac Airport?
Central Terminal.
Why do you say that?
Because it's where there's the most people who can have a place to sit and enjoy the music.
Okay.
But number 2, a very close number 2, and sometimes the highest grossing location in the airport, is at the intersection of the Central Terminal. It's not too far from Central Terminal, but it's where it splits off to Concourse C and D, which is Alaska Airlines primarily, and also out to North Satellite, which is Alaska. And as we all know, Alaska is like the number 1 carrier out of SeaTac. So It also had a tremendous amount of foot traffic walking by. And so just the sheer volume, and it was kind of like a pinch point there. So people kind of had to walk close to where the artist was performing, because we set them. Are you familiar with where the Sub Pop music store is?
I am.
Yeah.
I am.
So we set up right out in front of Sub Pop, because of course, what more perfect location than that for Seattle music. And actually we were there before Sub Pop opened. It was always a good location. So it wasn't busy because Sub Pop was there. It was busy because it was like one of the busiest locations in the airport for foot traffic.
But then adding Sub Pop as the backdrop is kind of a cool.
It was a cool thing.
Tie-in.
It made for better photo ops for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
sure,
absolutely. And so that.
Surprised you didn't put them right in the TSA line so people could listen to music while they were waiting.
We tried, and TSA said none of that. We have to be able to talk to each other and know what's going on. So that's our biggest challenge at the airport, was maintaining a sound level that made everybody happy and could still be listened to through people who wanted to listen to it. So, most of the people at the airport are working there, and their voice had to be heard too, not just the travelers.
Right. Next question that pops in my brain is, out of all of these shows, do you keep track of who's well received and who's not as well received? Yeah,
it's pretty easy, as it turns out, because we're doing these concerts in a busker format. So there's only a few gigs. Like Amazon, they don't want musicians to sell their merchandise or collect tips, because they are doing it as a perk to the travelers. I mean, to their employees.
Employees.
Yeah. So it's like more of a private event. But all of the other locations are in public places. And so the musicians have the ability to have an open guitar case and share merchandise out and some signage, and of course, they're entertainers, and they're also business people, so they sell their merchandise.
Right.
And that has always accounted to be more than we pay them. So we are paying them. That's very, very important to our business models, that we pay musicians to play, because there are airports that have busker programs because they've seen the success of ours, but they do not pay their musicians, and they do not curate their musicians. It's more like Pike Place Market. Not to say there's anything wrong with that, but I think our product and service is far superior to anything else you'll see in any other airport.
So, painting with broad brush, what genre is the best received at the airport?
Well, we've learned over time that the best thing you can do is to mix covers with original music. Every musician wants to play their original music. And as a matter of fact, these gigs are a great way for musicians to refine their songs and to work on new material and become another hidden perk we found for musicians. Not only are they making money at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, but they're also becoming better musicians as a result. And they're making contacts. I mean, we've had musicians take gigs as far away as China because someone saw them at SeaTac Airport. We've had musicians be in a movie in Los Angeles because someone saw them at SeaTac Airport.
No way. Really?
Yeah.
That's such a cool story.
Oh my God. It's the stories go on and on. I mean, one day, one of the musicians was just doing their set. Her name is Sarah Christine. She's lovely, really one of our babes. And someone walked up to her and said, hey, I'm traveling with someone who's been listening to you, and we'd really like to meet you. Is that okay if I bring him over? And she says, of course. Well, he brings over Stevie Wonder. And so she got to meet Stevie Wonder, and he gave her accolades and said what a great, how much he enjoyed listening to her. And there's many, many stories like that involve local musicians that we all know that have been extremely generous to the musicians playing at SeaTac Airport. And not only generous financially, but generous in their praise and their support of, just giving people a hand up. It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's hard to measure how I get teary sometimes when I think about what a great thing this has been. Another one of my favorite stories is musician Gretchen Janover. She plays electric cello beautifully, of course. And so she was playing one day, and an Asian couple with a little 3-year-old boy stopped and listened. And the little boy was just totally engrossed, and the parents could not get him to leave. They wanted to go to their gate and be ready for the boarding, but they had time, and they just let that little boy sit there for like well over a half an hour. And when they did leave, they bought one of Gretchen's CDs. Story over, right? No, not story over. So like 2 years later, Gretchen gets an email because they have her contact information off her CD from this couple, showing the little boy, now 5 years old, playing a cello at home. And he's listened to that CD of hers every day of his, for 2 years. And they bought him and gave him lessons to play cello, and he's playing cello today. That's
a great story.
It makes me cry.
That's a great story.
Yeah, there's so many heartwarming stories. We have, we ask musicians to share those stories with us because we can't be everywhere, and they do. And, I know we have Ramona's right here with me too. She has a lot of stories that she's heard from musicians because she took, the lead role with the artist relations and programming. But it was pretty incredible.
We could spend hours listening to the stories, but I'm going to switch it up and go the opposite direction.
Good idea.
Tell me about a problem. Like, was there ever a gig that just everything went wrong. There has to be stories of, the musicians showing up late or, forgetting something, or just, one of those star-crossed shows. Anything
it happens
weird happen at the airport?
All the time.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Okay.
it's not weird at all. These things happen all the time. And, here's the power of the machine we've created is like, I've had a musician call literally less than an hour out from the gig and saying, hey, my car died on the highway. I can't make it. I'm still, like 45 minutes away. And by the time I get this figured out, I just can't make it. So with this online scheduling system, you can, in a matter of minutes, put out a message to your whole database of people who are on the scheduling system saying, hey, I have a gig available. Who wants it? You could actually it's within 10 seconds. We get some musician who says, I'm there. I'll take it.
I'm laughing because it's like you've created Uber for musicians.
Pretty much.
Little map on your phone with guitars moving around the airport.
Yeah.
Who's close to the proximity to the airport?
Yes, and we have never failed to deliver on a gig because all of those things you mentioned have happened. We're able to fill a gig. Like I can name that tune in 2 seconds or 2 notes or whatever it is. I can fill that gig in 5 minutes. Watch this.
That's amazing. Yeah. So. I know that this question I'm going to ask like it's in the present, and it might be, but I understand that perhaps due to the pandemic, your database isn't as maybe robust as it used to be. But at its prime, how many musicians did you have in the database?
We probably have over 1,500 today, but
okay. And
we don't reach out to the whole database. I mean, as you can imagine, having been in this business and owned a venue, I know, how many musicians are out there, and there's just no way you either can or want to book them all, because they're at all levels, and
sure.
And also our gig requires that you can perform solo, and do that in a masterful way. You can't just be a hack and get up there by yourself and pull this off. So, just based on the criteria that we have, we almost exclusively only work with professional musicians. There's a few musicians who are, still have day jobs or, are pursuing other careers and only dabbling in it. But we try to make this program, on all of our programs, the artists we work with, be people who are doing their best to make a living at music. And we feel as though our role is to be a piece of that pie. Not all of the pie, but maybe like 1/5, maybe 1/8, I don't know. But depending on how well their career is going, maybe earlier on we're maybe 1/4 of their pie. But we could never be, no one's going to make a living just working for gigs for you as a musician. Because diversity and availability are so critical to our process. So, for example, at SeaTac Airport, in order to do 28 gigs a week and keep everybody happy and also have enough artists to be available, we maintain a roster of about 80 musicians for that particular program. And so that, and because they have been our largest client, we then take that roster and we kind of keep them working as much as we can. But a lot of our clients, whether if they're a summer concert series or something like that, then it goes out into areas that we may not have in our, that we work with on a regular basis on our busker type programs. So then that opens the door for us to bring in, new and more exciting, bigger stuff. We can do anything. I mean, I've booked stadiums. So, I mean, I have, we have the skill set and the knowledge to know how to, to book anything. But our core business is working with large organizations who need all of the things that we can deliver. The other thing that was really important to our clients is that, as we know, musicians need their money quicker than most of us in order to, keep gas in their tank and stuff like that, food on the table. And so we pay our musicians on a really pretty fast pace. We were weekly for a while, and we just couldn't maintain that. So we've gone to 2 weeks, and that's working out because now we've kind of developed enough bandwidth that's still enough money coming in to keep everybody happy. It was just a matter of workload. Doing that once a week or twice a week made a huge difference for us administratively. So, but we send an invoice to our clients, and and usually the bigger the client, the longer they take to pay you. Amazon being the best example. Airport has, because we trained them early on, because I had no resources, I couldn't support accounts receivable. They paid me pretty quickly, and they always have, unless someone takes a vacation and my invoice gets lost in their email for a couple of weeks, and then I get on the phone and go, "Hello, I have musicians who need to get their paychecks."
Right.
And we've had other clients who have been really supportive in that. But that's we do business like business has to do business, especially working with large organizations. And yet at the same time, on our musician side, we do business like musicians need to do business. So we pay them much faster than we get paid.
That's great that you take care of the artists, and then they keep coming back and they fill in gigs if somebody's car breaks down. That's just amazing to me.
That was a lesson learned from when I owned the Backstage in Ballard. I found out over time, I just kind of inherently always do a really good work. I'm really meticulous, and things are clean and neat, and food tastes good, and everything is as good as it can be. But I found that if the musician is comfortable and taken care of and respected, that they end up performing way better than and it took me a long time to really see this clearly at the Backstage. I just did it naturally, but then I saw how other people were doing business, and I heard stories from other musicians, and they were always saying, "God, this is our favorite place to play." These are musicians who tour the country, and they come in. Why is that? What am I doing? Help me out here. Tell me what I'm doing that makes it so great. And they just said all those things. Well, you're just always prepared. Your sound system is great. I just feel like doing a great show when I'm here because I'm so happy to be here.
There you go.
Well,
which then
there you go.
Gives your
same thing.
Your venue the reputation of being a great venue to see live music at, because the performers are
it came full circle, didn't it? Yeah, and then the audience was going, "God, I saw the best shows at the Backstage." Well, they did. They saw the best shows that performer ever did, or one of the best shows.
Right. Versus having a bad day. And I still totally off topic, but it's music related. But totally off topic. I saw John Doe play a solo show at the High Dive in Fremont.
Mm-hmm.
So we go to the show, and John comes up on stage and he goes, "I don't feel good. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it through the show. Go get your money back. Come back in if you want. But I don't think you're going to get your money's worth tonight."
Mm-hmm.
2.5 hours later, he was still playing.
Yeah.
And it was a great show. I mean, he wasn't, but I appreciated the fact that he acknowledged he was having an off night.
Yeah.
That he wasn't feeling well.
Yeah.
And yet he still showed up, did the show, I don't want to say he gave his all. I can't speak for him, but he gave a great performance.
How many people came back in?
Well, nobody left.
Exactly.
We also take our money, and we're here, and we get 30 minutes. We get 30 minutes. If we get an hour, we get an hour, whatever,
Exactly.
Next thing I know, there's shots of whiskey coming up on the stage for him.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, "Here, have some medicine, drink."
Right. Yeah.
And, he knocked a few back, and he was,
he's a
was
great
he at
guy.
his 100%?
Yeah.
Was he 100%? Probably
not. Yeah.
But you know what? He didn't try to fake it either. I like that. So we'll wrap this up because you've got to go book some gigs.
Yeah.
But March 2022, guys are gonna start dusting this off again. That's wonderful news.
Yeah.
What is it gonna be at first? Do you know how many gigs you're gonna try to roll out?
Well, the key thing with the airport was that we did such a huge volume that we could deliver gigs at a really low price. So when at the level we're at now, it's kind of like all of our other clients. So, it's not going to be, their dollar doesn't go as far. So it's going to end up being about 120 gigs during the whole year.
Okay. So much smaller to start with.
Much smaller. Now, if things change with the, if the pandemic actually does come to an end and things start going back to normal, we could see an increase at any time. But that's basically where we're at. And it was really been challenging because we're at, everybody's at the end of the line of getting financial support. So it's really challenging for us to figure out how to make it through this coming year with still will be probably maybe at the best 60% of the business we were doing before. So I think, there's no doubt that the entertainment industry has taken a bigger hit than most. I mean, I know there's others too, but we're sure taking the big one.
No,
but we're
absolutely.
pretty
it's hard for musicians.
Yeah, we're pretty confident that we have a plan in place, and it's with, sacrifices made on everyone's part. There's fewer musicians are going to be making money. They're going to have fewer gigs. We're probably won't make money again this year for the third year. And, but we're going to come out on the other side. Instead of being with no debt and a bright future, we're going to have a big pile of debt, but we still have a bright future.
Yeah. Well, I think, I've seen some reviews about SeaTac Airport and the music that's there, and it's garnered a lot of positive press. Yeah. And you've got a instrumental role in that. And I anticipate that COVID will probably exist in some form all the time. We're just going to, as society, learn to adapt to what that looks like in public places. And we'll go from there. And maybe you're putting plexiglass screens up in front of the music. Who knows? Right. I don't know. Right. I don't know. And, but where can people, is there a place online people can find out more about what you guys are doing, or
of course.
What can we do to share that?
Yeah. We have, our website is gigsforyou.org, O-R-G. And of course that's the number 4 and the letter U. And so at our website, there's a place where musicians can sign up to be in our database, and they will, they're automatically into our database, and then we review every submission, and then on a more like a quarterly basis, we update our roster. So so we're not updating the roster all the time. I mean, occasionally, especially if it's a referral or something like that, someone who's just automatically, we need to put this person to work right away because we know they're going to really please our clients and, their guests. So, but it can be a slow process. And it's, it's like the music business has always been, you're going to get on the merry-go-round and not everybody gets that golden ticket. So we're just a smaller merry-go-round in the big picture of show business.
All right. Well, Ed, thank you so much for having, creating the schedule to come back for a second time so we could just really just talk about the gigs for you part of what you've done in your career. It's, I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting in the sense of the logistics of it. I hadn't really given it a lot of thought. And now all I want to do is ask questions about logistics, but I'm probably the only person that would want to listen to that. So I'll spare our listeners those questions.
Well, how about this?
But
next time you fly out of SeaTac and we're back in business, let me know and I'll connect you with our people on site and they can kind of show you around and how we make it work. I
would love that.
Yeah.
I would love that. Yeah. So that we'll absolutely will take you up on that.
Cool.
Appreciate that. So thank you. And Ramona, thank you for being a part of this too, even though you're not on the episode live with us.
She is just 3 feet away from me.
Well, tell her to say hello.
Okay. She's hello to you, Ramona.
Oh.
waving.
Tell Ramona to say hello.
Oh.
We want Ramona on the episode.
Oh, can you say hello? Yeah, you know how to say hello.
Hello.
See, she knows how to say hello.
There we go. That's Ramona, everybody. All right. Well, I will let you go. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thanks a lot. See you later, Scott.
Join us next time for another episode of the Exploring Washington State podcast.